Hello, welcome to Soulprint Intuitive Tarot. You will be seeing this video on October 2nd. I will release it tomorrow morning. This is a Canadian election reading. So I want to focus in on a couple things. We have a viewer named Charlene who is paying a great deal of attention to the elections. And one of the things that she seems to be concerned about is that the media does not appear to be completely unbiased. She feels like there is a lot more emphasis being played to the conservatives, and that, you know, things that would show Trudeau in a good light are sort of not being spoken about or being overshadowed. So I am going to take a look at that and just see what else the universe would like us to know about the coming Canadian election. And there is a cat that is meowing. I'm aware of it. She's going to keep on meowing. She's in a kennel right now because she's going to go see the vet very soon, and she's having a few issues. So you're just going to continue to hear her indignation in the background. Okay, so come on down and let's take a look at election media coverage and see, you know, where that goes. So I have a question and let's take a look. So we're looking at Canadian media election coverage, Canadian media election coverage, Canadian media election coverage. Oh, I know, little kitty cat. I know. Okay, so starting, you know, here. So we have a situation where in some ways you almost have, you know, two sort of, I want to say, equal dynamics playing out from opposite directions. On the one hand, I mean, you've got literally the Page of Swords and the Knight of Swords. So you're talking about information coming forward. You're talking about legal processes. You're talking about elections. And this appears as if there is going to continue to be more information that comes out and comes to light. And there's going to, this looks really interesting because it looks like there is going to be some attention paid to money. The way money has been spent, the way it has been collected, who's been contributing. I'm not exactly sure. But it definitely looks as if there is definitely some news that we can expect pertaining to money. Now, because we're looking at the media connected to the election, certainly there is a component to this that sort of looks as if it is more about the media making money, trying to attract their customers, trying to get their people to tune in, you know, increase the amount of advertisers. I mean, at the bottom of it all, the news companies are a business, unfortunately. You know, they're not sort of as independent, maybe, as they used to try to be. Now it seems that everybody sort of has a lean, and you can usually figure out what the lean is if you know, just watch them for a little bit. There are going to be some more truths coming out, and there is definitely going to be some balancing going on, and there's going to be a situation that comes up where people are going to sort of change the way they think about something. So I don't know if this is going to be, you know, some of the stuff that has been coming out about him. It may all kind of come together in a clump so that there is, you know, more attention paid to it, and there is a sort of more of a reaction. But there's definitely a sense that there's a lot more stuff that needs to come out, and that there will be achieved a balance. And whether that is a media balance or whether that is just a balance in the way information is being presented, or whether it actually, in fact, is talking about the continued sort of balance, but literally between the conservatives and the liberals, because this race is so tight, there is like not a whole lot of wiggle room. And in some ways, the greater concern, as I'm looking at this now, is that unless the liberals get a really, really strong turnout, or unless people who would like to see a minority government between, for example, the Liberals and the Green Party, that their votes are voted very smart, that there's some strategy put into this, because of a whole bunch of people vote Green Party instead of Liberal, looking for that liberal minority government. What you're going to do is you're going to give blocks of votes to the conservatives, right? So you're going to end up splitting the vote on the liberal side, whereas the vote is unlikely to get split on the conservative side, because those people are all sort of very aware and very mindful of the exact same thing, and they want the exact same thing, which is they want oil production to go up. They're talking about getting that middle class back to work, except they don't seem to be spending enough time talking about at what cost to the planet, or how do we mitigate some of the damage to the planet. So over the next coming weeks, there's going to be a little bit of a shifting in terms of people getting a little bit more strategic about how they're going to be voting, and about the things that they're hearing and listening to. It feels as if there's going to be more information coming out, and people who are still unbiased, as in those people who have not made up their mind and are so set on it, it doesn't matter what you say. But there's going to be some shifts and changes, and do not be like alarmed or really surprised if you see, polls that are sort of becoming a little bit erratic. This is normal. This is part of the process. This is part of how the election is meant to unfold. There is not going to be a clear leader from point A to point B, because we are at a fork in the road, and in terms of this Canadian election and what we want it to represent, what we want to tell ourselves about our country, and what we want the world to understand about our country. We are literally at a fork in the road. So it's going to go one way, or the other. It's going to either go conservative and or liberal. And the only thing that we're looking at is definitely Elizabeth May, for sure, is saying that she will not form like a coalition government with the conservatives, because their environmental policies are just not where they need to be. And I think I've already heard the NDP saying that they're not too interested in forming that coalition government with the conservatives. So there needs to be a little bit of strategy, and that's going to start, I think, just catching people's attention. More and more people are going to be kind of become aware. And there's going to be, I get the sense that there's going to be some strategic voting going on, in part because as secrets continue to come out, there's really going to be a sense that, we need some stability, and we need to move away from this sort of Trumpian political behavior. It's not going to play well in Canada, except for those people who are trying very hard to get back to the way things used to be. There is also a sense, as this thing gets closer, I think that you're going to see almost a pulling back or a backing off of some of the media in terms of being a little bit more balanced in the way they're presenting their information. As it gets closer, I think that in some ways, Canadians are simply going to demand that we are given the facts. That is our expectation moving towards an election. And I sort of see a little bit of a retreat in terms of the way the media is looking at presenting their information. They're not always going to be thrilled about that balance because, let's face it, every channel has their... Jerry, could you just move your tail, sweetie pie? Thank you. Or not. Jerry, tuck that tail in. You know, every sort of channel has their agenda, their bias, okay? But it looks as if we're going to try to get a little bit more balance. Would you like to say hello? Is that what this is about? Hold on. There. Say hi, people. I'm Jerry, the three-legged cat. I love my people. I love this house. But I'm miserable because it's getting cold and I'm not allowed to play in our backyard anymore, so I'm sad. Get back to this. Okay. So, again, this is another situation where, you know, Canadians also have to take a good hard look at how they want their government to behave and how they want their government representatives to behave. And if the behavior is not in keeping with the promise of the attributes of Canada, that also needs to be looked at and addressed. And, you know, I just see that there are going to be another week or two of some pretty nasty judgments, of some stuff coming out. But again, there, you know, so far the Canadian public appears to have not really reacted to the dirt being slung. We're almost of a mind to just ignore it, it seems. It's, you know, it's just like not penetrating. I think part of it is we have lived through 3 years of the United States. We have lived through, I'm not even sure, 3 or 4 years of Brexit. And there comes to a point where you're just simply saturated and you're like, listen, let's get back down to basics. Let's stick with the issues that are important to Canadians, and let's figure out how going forward we can work in a united fashion to get the best benefit and the best results for the country and its citizens. That just seems to be sort of an energy that's coming off of this election. There really is just a sense that we are not prepared to take the steps to go down a road that is going to lead us into a Trumpian presidency, into a Ford premier, into a Kenny premier. I mean, I'm in Alberta and they love him, but boy, I sure don't. You know, I worry about the promises that he makes that don't seem to be particularly mindful of who or what gets run over in an attempt to keep a promise. And instead of keeping promises, some of those things should be revisited for healthier and more sustainable options. But it's hard to do that, you know, if you got big oil backing you. Okay. So I think at this point, I've said this before, it still continues to look as if the Liberals are going to sneak ahead with a coalition government. And I actually see it being with the Green Party as opposed to the NDP, even though I think the last time I looked, the NDP were actually out ahead a little bit of the Green Party. So that still looks like how it feels. I think some of the stuff that Scheer has been, you know, has been things that have been going on around him, some of the mudslinging, and more importantly with Scheer, it's almost like some of the lies or the inaccuracies or the half-truths of his own making are actually coming back and there is going to be definitely a price to be paid for that. I mean, you have the Wheel of Fortune here, you have the Fool, and you have the Tower. This does not bode well. And because I was talking about sheer as I was flipping those cards, I'm going to attribute these cards to him. So definitely it looks like there's going to be a little bit of comeuppance that he is going to have to deal with. And as I said, some of it really does look like these are self-inflicted injuries. These are things that he did not have to do or say, or lie about, that he has chosen to do that, and now it comes out. You know, Trudeau learned a very valuable lesson very early in his role as Prime Minister, when he took that trip to the island, wherever the island was, and, you know, and everybody made such a big fuss about the fact that, you know, he was taking something of value, kind of, right? And I mean, I spent that whole time really confused. Like, I just kept walking around saying, well, okay, but if he's getting to an island, how is he supposed to get to the island if he either, one, doesn't get on a boat, or two, doesn't get on a helicopter? I mean, to me, this was just logic. But what Trudeau learned was the scrutiny that comes down is a place where you don't have a lot of wiggle room. And I think that is something that Scheer has just somehow not factored in. He just hasn't quite figured out that it's actually going to be, you know what, way more intensive than he expected or thought it would be. So here's what I'm looking at. I'm looking at, you've got the Ace of Wands coming up to talk about communications, more communications coming up. Both campaigns, frankly, that are in the lead are both worried. They're both concerned. They're not neither one is pulling ahead, which again is really indicative of a little bit more divisiveness in this country than we as its citizens would like to see. And it's also talking about illusions and delusions that are going to be called out. So things that are not true, stories that are not accurate, there is going to be pushback. And whether that pushback comes from the people, or it comes from the media, or it comes from their political opponents, I don't know. But either way, it definitely looks as if there's going to be some pushback on the parties about things that are just not making sense. You know, things that just don't pass the smell test, or things that make one or the other or all of them look bad. But there's going to be a breaking down of some of the illusions, some of the stories, and some of the fantasies that they're hoping to sell. Okay, so there we have it. Again, I do the Canadian political readings weekly, unless it looks like there's something really amazing that's happening that catches my attention. And in that case, I'll, jump on and see what I have to say. But for now, I guess I will see you next week. Until then, keep your thoughts positive and light-filled. Do not succumb to worry, because that only feeds the very thing that you're worrying about. So let's stay positive. Let's stay Canadian, eh? Until next time, take care and be well. Bye-bye.